Welcome to the Biblical and Theological Studies Faculty Development Retreat, curriculum design that tends to the whole person. What we're facing today are challenges from both the external and the internal. This chart discusses some of the higher education challenges that all colleges are facing, and on the right-hand side are things unique to our BTS department. On the left-hand side, higher education is facing challenges with diversity of student concerns that are ever increasing, growing concern over graduate skills, their knowledge and values acquired from lecture-heavy programs, and increasing scrutiny behind the financial investment of a college degree. Our BTS department is facing unique challenges as well, which include unclear transition from BTS curriculum to meaningful vocation, as well as shallow learning outcomes for the majority of BTS courses. And lastly, BTS is also facing increased competition with STEM programs for students. Well, what are we as faculty going to do to overcome these challenges? Making the leap. Overcoming these challenges is going to require some slow and deep fundamental changes to a variety of things. The first of a big change to our desired outcomes from our BTS graduates. What do we want to see when they graduate? What are some of those changes? Another change is our curriculum design in order to meet these outcomes that we want to see from the graduates. Our roles as faculty in fostering this change has to take place as well. That will be a deep and slow fundamental change. And lastly, our degree of impact on alumni, vocation, society. Our degree of impact has to change as well. And one thing to point out that undergirds all these things is that our success depends on balancing three things. The institutional realities we face, which are the number of faculty we have, the number of hours we work in a day, our location. The external challenges, the things we mentioned earlier about continued increasing competition with STEM programs, increased scrutiny of the value of a degree. And lastly, our kingdom expectations. What is expected of us not as faculty, but also as God-fearing mentors. Here's a preview of some of the developmental topics we'll discuss throughout this fall. I want to bring in a quote from Reese and Lone from their book Deep Mentoring, which serves as a guideline for the needed change that we discuss in overcoming some of these challenges. It says, shape the person and you stand a much greater chance of shaping everything else. And while this quote serves as the overarching theme of this change process in our developmental process as staff and faculty, a few questions surface. The initial questions: what constitutes shaping the person? Secondly, what constitutes shaping everything else? And the primary question behind these two is, how does this shaping process impact our desired learning outcomes in the classroom? Shaping the whole person. From Reese and Lone, they state that by shaping the whole person, you stand a greater chance of shaping everything else. Well, the whole person concerns more than just the formal identity as a BTS student. It concerns holistic human development and not just academic progress. Their formal identity as a BTS student means that they have a student ID. It means that they have a right to sit in the classroom because they're paying tuition dollars. Well, the whole person goes beyond that when we want to shape that person. It's their human development, the holistic human development. And then how does this impact our learning outcomes if we're going to focus on their human development? Well, it means redefining the breadth of learning outcomes that cover both cognitive and affective domains. Not only do we want to train and educate the cognitive ability of learning and acquiring new knowledge, but we also want to impact their affective domains. How has the behavior changed? How has their attitude changed after taking a course? It also means redefining the depth of learning outcomes that cover both factual knowledge acquisition as well as complex problem solving and ethical reasoning. So not only do we want to have breadth, but we want to go deep. Not only do we want them to have just more knowledge about dates, theologians, and how different quotes in the Bible impact different theologies, but we want them to also have complex problem-solving skills and understanding how does this impact the way we shape our culture? How does these theologies impact the way I treat my family, the way I view my community, and what this impacts mean for justice? When you shape the whole person, you stand a greater chance of shaping everything else. Well, what is everything else? Everything else is the corporate impact when shaping the whole person. It constitutes the person's livelihood, their vocation, ministry, leadership capacity, community service, and overall societal impact. And when you shape everything else, how does this impact the learning outcomes? And how are we to change our view of the learning outcomes? Well, it means redefining the implementation of learning outcomes, which constitutes how we as faculty establish, repeat, and inculcate desired outcomes throughout. It also means redefining expectations of learning outcomes, which constitutes how the mastery of learning outcomes impacts the person beyond just our classroom. Well, how does this view on learning outcomes change our role and responsibility as BTS faculty? There's going to be a number of fundamental role changes, from lecture-heavy sage on the stage to more actual facilitators of meaning making. It's not enough to be a sage on the stage, we have to make meaning of the things that we're discussing. From teacher lecturers to coaches of understanding. From gatekeepers of institutional grades to shepherds of transferred learning. One key point to keep in mind: BTS faculty were selected for their academic prowess, but they were also carefully considered because of their sensitivity to kingdom-building work. And while change is difficult, these kingdom efforts are most called upon during this developmental process. Here is a preview of some of the faculty development sessions we'll have later this fall. These sessions are built and scheduled based on Understanding by Design framework, which is a backwards-looking approach to curriculum design. Our first session will be August 23rd, which establishes the big picture results and then works backward from there, which will be asking, what is the ultimate change we want to see in our BTS graduates? When they walk across the stage and they graduate, what are some of the deep changes we want to see them have? September 19th, we'll be discussing bridging learning outcomes with assessments. So if we have the big picture results in mind and we establish that, well, what are the assessments we'll use to measure that? How will BTS students demonstrate this change throughout the program? November 3rd, we'll be discussing the laying the groundwork piece. This is the prequel to the assessments, which is a best practice toolkit for activities, lesson plans, and class session design. And lastly, putting it all together on December 10th. This will discuss the kingdom building implications behind this curricular design. One last note. This is from Parker Palmer's Let Your Life Speak. And while we are facing a number of external challenges and institutional realities, this faculty development plan will require deep fundamental change. And while it's always not the most exciting thing to face these types of changes, I hope Parker Palmer's quote here can encourage you. He says, "We in North America have a long and crippling legacy of believing in the power of external realities much more deeply than we believe in the power of the inner life. How many times have you heard or said, 'Those are inspiring notions, but the hard reality is'? How many times have you worked in systems based on the belief that the only changes that matter are the ones you can measure or count? How many times have you watched people kill off creativity by treating traditional policies and practices as absolute constraints on what we can do?" And while our organization and our BTS department is muddied in policies and practices, let's not let that limit what we can do to make deep impacted change to some of the students that we mentor and that we'll see develop in this program. Thank you.